The truck backed toward the edge of the dusty farmyard just after sunrise, and hundreds of cracked eggs tumbled into a growing pile. Workers laughed as they called them worthless garbage, convinced nothing living could ever come from them. Most people turned away without a second glance. But standing quietly behind an old weathered fence was a skinny farm boy whose eyes were fixed on that mountain of broken shells as though he could already see something no one else believed was possible. Before the sun reached its highest point, that forgotten pile of trash would become the beginning of a miracle that would forever change an entire farming community. Before we continue, if you believe kindness is stronger than cruelty, that hope can bloom even from what others throw away, and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue bringing you inspiring stories that remind us never to give up on life. Every morning, as daylight spread across the rolling countryside, 17-year-old Everett Collins walked the gravel roads carrying worn-out work gloves tucked into his back pocket. He lived with his widowed grandmother, Marjorie Collins, inside a tiny white farmhouse whose faded paint peeled a little more each season. Their old red barn leaned slightly to one side, the wooden beams creaking whenever the afternoon breeze swept across the open fields. Money was scarce, the crops had failed more than once, and every dollar had to stretch farther than seemed possible. Still, Marjorie refused to surrender to bitterness. She had always told Everett that the world often confused broken things with worthless things, and that the greatest miracles usually began where everyone else stopped looking. Not far from their home stood one of the largest poultry processing facilities in the county. Every afternoon, trucks hauled away cartons filled with perfect eggs while damaged ones were discarded because grocery stores refused to accept them. Tiny cracks in the shells meant automatic rejection. Thousands of eggs were thrown away every month, regardless of whether many still contained healthy developing chicks or usable contents. Most farmers ignored the waste because sorting through it required patience that few people possessed. Everett had noticed the discarded eggs for weeks. He watched gulls circle overhead while workers dumped another load into a designated waste area. Something deep inside him refused to believe every cracked egg represented a lost chance at life. He spent evenings reading old poultry books borrowed from the county library, learning how shell damage affected hatch rates and discovering that not every cracked egg was beyond saving if handled carefully and quickly. One bright morning, Everett approached the facility manager and politely asked whether he could collect the discarded eggs instead of watching them go to waste. The request was met with puzzled expressions before several workers burst into laughter. They joked that if Everett wanted trash, they had plenty to spare. The manager shrugged with amusement and agreed, believing the young farm boy would return disappointed after discovering the impossible task ahead. By midday, Everett carefully loaded 400 cracked eggs into old wooden crates lined with soft straw. Every shell received a gentle inspection beneath the warm daylight. Many eggs were beyond saving, their cracks too severe or their contents already spoiled. Yet dozens showed only tiny fractures. Everett remembered every page he had studied. Using simple materials he already owned, he carefully sealed the smallest cracks with thin layers of melted wax, providing temporary protection against harmful bacteria while allowing the shells to remain stable enough for careful incubation. Neighbors passing the farmhouse slowed their trucks just long enough to shake their heads. Some chuckled openly while others quietly pitied the determined teenager. They believed grief over years of hardship had clouded his judgment. Children whispered jokes as they rode bicycles down the country lane. Adults smiled politely before exchanging doubtful glances. No one imagined that patience could ever overcome the odds stacked against those fragile eggs. Inside the old barn, sunlight streamed through narrow wooden gaps, filling the air with golden beams that danced across floating dust particles. Everett transformed one forgotten storage corner into a simple hatchery using salvaged insulation, second-hand heat lamps, homemade humidity trays, and careful temperature monitoring. Every hour during daylight, he checked the eggs, rotated them gently, and recorded detailed notes inside a weathered notebook whose pages soon became filled with observations and hopeful calculations. Marjorie watched from the doorway each afternoon. She never promised success because she understood nature often wrote its own ending. Instead, she reminded Everett that compassion was never wasted, even when the outcome remained uncertain. Saving even one life from certain destruction would already make the effort worthwhile. The first week passed slowly. Some eggs failed despite Everett's best efforts. Each loss weighed heavily on his heart. He carried the unusable shells away with quiet respect, refusing to grow discouraged. Every setback became another lesson. He adjusted humidity levels, improved airflow, and refined his careful methods while the summer sun continued to brighten each passing day. One afternoon, while inspecting the eggs beneath gentle daylight, Everett noticed the faintest movement beneath a repaired shell. His heartbeat quickened. Moments later, another egg trembled. Tiny tapping sounds echoed softly through the barn. Hairline cracks widened from the inside, not from failure but from determination. Before sunset painted the western sky with warm golden colors, the first fluffy chick pushed through the shell and took its first shaky breath. Everett smiled through tears. The impossible had happened. Over the following days, more chicks emerged. Not all survived, but far more than anyone had believed possible. The old barn gradually filled with cheerful peeping that echoed across the farm. Warm sunlight poured through the open barn doors, illuminating dozens upon dozens of healthy chicks exploring fresh bedding beneath Everett's careful watch. Word spread quickly throughout the county. Farmers who had once laughed now arrived simply to see whether the rumors were true. Many expected exaggeration but instead found thriving young birds moving energetically around clean pens. Everett never celebrated by reminding anyone they had doubted him. Instead, he patiently explained what he had learned about careful selection, sanitation, and persistence. A local science teacher visited after hearing the story. She recognized Everett's detailed records and encouraged him to share his methods with agricultural students. She explained that innovation often came from people willing to question accepted habits. Everett felt embarrassed by the praise, insisting he had simply refused to believe that every damaged shell meant hopelessness. Months passed beneath clear daytime skies. The surviving chicks matured into healthy laying hens and sturdy roosters. Egg production slowly increased, providing Everett and Marjorie with their first reliable source of income in years. They repaired the leaking barn roof, replaced broken fencing, and planted fresh vegetable gardens. For the first time since Everett could remember, worry no longer dominated every family meal. Then another unexpected challenge arrived. A violent daytime windstorm swept across the valley, damaging coops throughout neighboring farms. Fences collapsed, feed supplies scattered, and many poultry owners faced heartbreaking losses. Everett looked across the battered countryside and remembered how others had once treated him. He could have kept his growing flock safely behind locked gates, protecting only his own future. Instead, he chose generosity. Using wagons borrowed from nearby friends, Everett delivered healthy young birds to struggling families whose flocks had been devastated. He asked for little in return beyond a promise that they would someday help someone else facing impossible circumstances. His kindness spread hope faster than anyone expected. The same workers who had laughed while dumping cracked eggs watched with quiet humility as Everett loaded birds into trailers headed toward neighboring farms. They realized the young man they had dismissed as foolish had become the person helping rescue an entire agricultural community. The poultry facility manager eventually visited the Collins farm in person. Standing beneath the bright afternoon sun, he walked through the lively barn, now overflowing with healthy chickens whose cheerful sounds filled every corner. He admitted that throwing away every cracked egg without inspection had been a costly mistake. Inspired by Everett's success, the company launched a program allowing recoverable eggs to be donated to educational farms and small agricultural projects instead of automatically becoming waste. Everett never sought recognition, but local newspapers shared the remarkable transformation. Agricultural organizations invited him to demonstrate low-cost incubation techniques for small farmers. Environmental groups praised the reduction in unnecessary waste. School children toured the Collins farm, learning that careful thinking and compassion could accomplish far more than ridicule ever could. Marjorie often sat on the farmhouse porch during warm afternoons, smiling as children laughed while feeding chickens that had once been dismissed as worthless. Watching Everett patiently answer endless questions reminded her that true wealth could never be measured only in money. It lived inside the courage to keep believing when everyone else had already surrendered. Years of hardship had taught Everett something many successful people never fully understood. Broken beginnings did not determine final endings. Every cracked shell, every damaged dream, every person overlooked by society still carried hidden possibilities waiting for someone willing to care enough to look closer. The overflowing barn became far more than a successful farm. It stood as living proof that hope often survives in places where others see only failure. Visitors continued arriving from neighboring counties, not because they wanted to see chickens, but because they wanted to understand the quiet determination that had transformed rejection into renewal. Everett always greeted them with humility. He reminded every guest that the miracle had never been about eggs alone. It had always been about refusing to let someone else's opinion define the value of a life, an opportunity, or a dream. Before this story comes to its close, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment telling us about a time when you refused to give up on something everyone else believed was hopeless, or share what lesson from Everett's journey touched your heart the most. As the afternoon sun cast its warm golden light across the thriving farm, the once empty barn echoed with thousands of joyful chirps, the field stretched green with new promise, and Marjorie looked at her grandson with quiet pride. The pile of cracked eggs that others had called trash had become a symbol of compassion, perseverance, and second chances. Everett never forgot the laughter that greeted him on the first day, but he also chose never to hold on to resentment. Forgiveness allowed him to move forward, kindness allowed others to grow beside him, and hope turned what looked like waste into a future overflowing with life. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Thank you for being part of our family and our community, where every story reminds us that sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the things the world is too quick to throw away.